Being prepared is very important. It helps you be more comfortable when you're dealing with an emergency. You're not so excited, and you don't often make that many mistakes.
There are many challenges in dealing with a sudden emergency. You need to respond quickly, coordinate information, resources, and people, and each person must know what their role is. There needs to be a system already in place and fully tested in each community. To do this, you need a community emergency plan. When an emergency occurs, this is what your community will use. Emergency management seeks to protect. It is a way to limit the damage to people, property, and the environment. It is a way to help keep you and your community safe from harm. It is also a shared responsibility that builds a sustainable, prosperous, and resilient society. The Community Emergency Plan is the tool that helps you prepare for an emergency. It is the document that the community itself creates to look at what might happen, what can be done about it, and who's going to do it.
Typically, a community emergency plan will include a hazards identification and risk assessment, a list of community resources, a list of community contacts, an all hazards plan, specific hazards plans, and an evacuation and reception plan.
Council can start the emergency plan process by appointing a coordinator and committee to develop and maintain the emergency plan. After the plan is developed and written, it will need to be reviewed and approved. Once it is in place, it is used not only when needed for emergencies, but also for training and practice. Your community council should appoint an emergency management coordinator, form a committee, and approve a budget for development of the community emergency plan. The position of coordinator needs to be filled by someone in the community with a thorough knowledge of local affairs, resources, and facilities, such as the SAO or band manager. The members of the committee usually include the mayor or chief, the SAO or band manager, other members of the community council, key representatives of service groups, as well as support agencies or individuals with knowledge or abilities relevant to an emergency situation. The committee responsible for managing the overall response to an incident is the Community Emergency Response Committee, or CERC. Because they are the ones who will activate the emergency plan and the Emergency Operations Center, it is vital that your community emergency plan includes a contact list of all the members of your Community Emergency Response Committee. This list needs to include contact information for committee members and their alternates if members are not reachable. These must include home addresses and phone numbers which allow you to reach these people 24 hours a day, such as home, office, and cell numbers. You also need to include any agency names and numbers that would be helpful, such as search and rescue, bush radio operators, nearby communities, and the MACA superintendent. It is important to keep this information up to date and checked about every 3 months so that it remains current and correct. The next step of the process is to analyze hazards, risks, and vulnerabilities. You can't really develop an emergency plan unless you know what emergencies you are planning for. This step is really the starting point for the process of developing your plan by identifying and looking at possible emergencies your community might face. You need to complete an HIRA, or Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment. Doing an HIRA will help you to know which emergencies are the most likely and the most dangerous for your particular community.
The HIRA process is important as it allows us to prioritize hazards and to determine which hazards will need action plans.
The HIRA process itself begins with gathering information about your community. All committee members need to look at the characteristics of the community and identify the hazards. You'll use local knowledge, research, and imagination to think of all the natural or people-caused hazards that could affect your community. You will need information on the present state of your community. You should also consider the past and the future when you identify local hazards. Consider historical events, emerging threats, and new development, whether it is planned or under construction. Using local knowledge and historical records can help you understand what events have occurred in the past, such as the 100-year flood level, or when the last major forest fire occurred. These will help you know what kind of hazards could occur in the future. It's also important to be creative and think of possible new or emerging threats. Events that were not a hazard in the past may now need to be considered. For example, major marine accidents in the Arctic Ocean weren't a threat in the past, but there is real hazard caused by the amount of marine traffic in Arctic waters today. Development of the oil and gas resources in the Arctic would only raise the level of the hazard further. New developments in the region can also become a local hazard, such as a new road.
We have to do an inventory of hazards in our community, and so I'm going to...
The following list of hazards are common for most communities in the Northwest Territories and should be included in your HIRA planning. Structural fire, forest fire, health emergency, extreme weather, hazardous material incident, transportation accident, extended power failure, other utilities failure, environmental contamination, flooding, public disturbance.
Now that you have a list of hazards, rank them from most threatening to the community to least threatening to the community. Which hazards are most likely to occur and to have major impacts on the community?
It is important to consider hazards in relation to vulnerabilities, or what is most in danger of being harmed or damaged in an emergency. Any time there is a significant potential for a major impact from an incident, then there is a significant hazard. These hazards should be dealt with as a high priority. This completes your hazard identification and risk assessment process. The results of the community's HIRA process provide the starting point for planning for the emergencies which are most likely to impact the community. HIRA work helps the community to manage emergencies or disasters in the most efficient way. It enables resources to be applied to the most likely threats or those that might cause the greatest amount of damage. Your community has limited resources, so you need to address the greatest risks first. The proper forms for completing this exercise can be downloaded from the Municipal and Community Affairs or MACA website.